Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roger Hartley, and I have the pleasure of serving as Dean of the College of Public Affairs at the University of Baltimore. And I wanted to welcome our students, faculty, staff, and all of those who joined us from outside of the university in our community for what is our third Voices of Public Service speaker series. On behalf of the entire university, our president, Kurt Schmoke, and our College of Public Affairs, I just wanted to welcome you. I'm really excited about today. We have the great pleasure of having with us today Mr. Thibault Manekin, who I'll provide a more formal introduction here in just a second, who works with Seawall Development here in our city of Baltimore. But, just to start, I wanted to remind you of the purpose of this speaker series. Voices of Public Service is an opportunity, and it was created by our Schaefer Center for Public Policy in what is our new Public Service Academy. And it's a wonderful partnership too with our Center for our Career and Internship Center at the University of Baltimore as well. The purpose of this speaker series is for students to have a chance to learn about different avenues of careers in the public and nonprofit and private sector, and really to kind of get some advice and learn from the journey of some of our public leaders here in the region, the state, and the nation. And it is absolutely my great pleasure, Thibault, that you accepted our invitation this semester to be in our series. From the introduction, I wanted to read a little bit of this to all of you because it is so very well written and it says a lot about our speaker today from several different angles. And they are the reasons why I invited Mr. Manekin today. From the time Thibault was growing up in Baltimore City, he wrestled to understand why we as human beings seem so divided. He continued to ask himself what truly causes those divides that separates races, cultures, and communities, and whether anything or what can be done to bridge those gaps. Armed with that burning question in 2002, Thibault traveled to South Africa, where he combined his passion for bringing people together with a love of sports to help create Peace Players, a nonprofit with the mission of bringing together children from war-torn countries and regions to around the world through basketball and through dialogue. Peace Players has since worked with over 75,000 youth from over 20 countries around the world and has trained over 2,000 coaches and change agents. And the program has won numerous global awards, including the 2007 ESPY's Arthur Ashe Award for Courage. Bothered, however, by how real estate and the control of land seem to have done more to divide us as people than actually bringing us together, in 2006, Thibault moved back to Baltimore, where he helped start Seawall, an impact-driven company made up of passionate social entrepreneurs who believe in reimagining the real estate industry as we know it. Seawall believes that all facets of the built environment should be used to empower communities, unite our cities, and help launch powerful ideas that create important movements. And since Seawall's inception, the company has focused its energy and its resources on providing discounted apartments for teachers, collaborative office space for nonprofit organizations, workforce housing, community-driven retail, public markets, launch pads for chefs, and creative space for charter schools. In 2011, Thibault was honored by President Obama's White House as a champion for change, and Seawall's projects have received numerous local and national awards. I was especially excited to invite you, Thibault, because of all of these intersections in your career and life, and how really I think you'll be very inspiring to our students from the standpoint of having worked with nonprofits, but also from the power of using the private sector as a tool for community-based development and change in those areas that you say and mention so rightly that our society is divided. With all of that, I'm pleased to introduce our guest today, Mr. Thibault Manekin of Seawall Development, who is also author of a recent book. And I am really excited that you're going to have the opportunity to tell us a little bit about that as well today, Thibault. The book is called Larger Than Yourself. Thank you for joining us. And just to let everyone know about how the webinar will work today, we also have with us today Mr. Scott Spencer, who is with the Annie E. Casey Foundation. Scott is a terrific public leader in the city of Baltimore. I had the pleasure of serving with him a number of years back on the Baltimore City Charter Review Commission, and he is also a member of our William Donald Schaefer Center's Board of Advisors. And so I also want to welcome today Scott Spencer. Scott and I will be kind of team interviewing you today, Thibault. And then what I'm going to ask all of the participants and attendees is to please put your questions in chat, but especially if you can, the Q&A function is even better. And we'll try to get to those during the interview, but we've also spent some time to save some time today for us to have a dialogue. And so we're really looking forward to that as well. So Thibault, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And Scott, would you like to lead off with our first question?
Sure. Thibault, it is great to see you. It is great to be here with you. I've been a fan of your work and a fan of your person for a long time. So I'm really happy to be here with you and to have the opportunity for other people to learn about the great work that you do and really a little bit more about who you are. While Roger gave a nice thumbnail sketch, actually it was a nice little abstract about you. I want you to just give us a little bit more about, tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and how you're driven.
Yeah. It's Scott. I'm an enormous fan. You've set the bar so high for so many of us in your community engagement and work throughout the city and even country. And Roger, the stuff that you guys are doing at UB, UB is a completely different institution than I remember growing up. The footprint that you guys have, the leaders that are coming out of your school. I'm friends with so many UB graduates, incredible people like Chris Wilson, who's just kind of a hero to so many of us. You all are putting Baltimore on the map through the way that you're going about leveling the playing field in education. And that means a lot. And it's great to be in space with you guys. So that was an incredible snapshot through that bio. I need to make those shorter because I feel like it doesn't leave a lot to talk about. I think I'll tell you guys a story, right, to kind of bring all of this into perspective. But I grew up in Baltimore City. I had these two really formative experiences from a really young age that led to two burning questions in my heart. Why are we so divided, and what creative ways can bridge those divides? As Roger read, when I graduated from high school and then from college, me and a couple friends went on to start an international nonprofit called Peace Players. And the idea is that we would go to war-torn countries and we would use sports, in our case basketball, to bridge divides, develop leaders, and change perceptions. So when you have an idea that you want to start, what do you have to do first, right? You've got to go out and raise some money for it. So we went to friends and family and we raised about $8,000, which at 21, 22 years old felt like $1 million. Like we were swimming in money as far as we were concerned. But it was enough to get on a plane to South Africa right after the fall of apartheid, where we were going to test this concept to see if basketball could get white kids and black kids playing sports together, bridging divides. And so we show up in the country of South Africa, in the city of Durban. And our first week was intense. If anything could go wrong, it went wrong. Everybody that we talked to on the ground said that this was a terrible idea, that it would never work in South Africa, the divisions were too great. The white people that we would meet at white bars and restaurants would tell us that, whatever you do, don't stop your car in black townships or rural communities, that it wouldn't be safe, that it would be violent. The black South Africans really didn't have trust, rightfully so, in the white community. And it was an intense week. At the end of the week, we were almost burnt out to the point of where we were going to quit. Or it was just like, it didn't feel like it was going to succeed. And so we decided to get out of town and clear our heads. And we made our way up to the mountains of the Drakensberg mountain range. And we did a beautiful hike, and we were coming down and there was still daylight left, and we're getting ready to drive back to Durban. And we are driving through rural South Africa, right? And there is this field below us as we're on these dirt roads, and there's like kind of a massive plain. And I don't know, Roger and Scott, there appear to be about 100 little kids on this field. They weren't doing anything organized. They were just kind of like milling around. And before we knew it, the little car that we were in had come to a complete stop. And I turned to my buddy Sean, who's in the car with me. We look at each other, we give each other a nod, and we jump out. This was the exact advice that everybody we met before we left for South Africa told us not to do. Don't stop in rural areas. You will not be safe. Every white South African that we had met during that first week warned us against this kind of behavior. And we just, for whatever reason, the car stopped. We got out. We popped the trunk. Everywhere we went, we carried a little basketball with us just in case. We make our way to the top of the hill, and this hill is really steep to get down to where these kids are. And as slow as we're trying to go to get to the bottom of the hill, we are eventually picking up steam. And this group of 100 little Zulu kids sees two 6'1", 6'2" white guys charging down the hill at them. This could only be bad news. So the youngest kids, the 3-year-olds, sprint as fast as their little legs will take them to the far end of the field, into the woods. There must have been a village behind there, crying hysterically. And the older kids, the 13, 14, 15-year-olds, kind of form the semicircle at the base of the hill, and we get down there, and I see it in their eyes when I get there. Their fists are clenched, and we have completely different expectations of why we've come down the hill. They think we're there to fight, and they are ready for it. So there was no real way to ease the tension, right? Like, we didn't speak any Zulu, they didn't speak any English. And so I go over to the first kid in the line, and I extend my hand to get a high five, and every kid takes a giant step back. So I go over to Sean. I understand that we're still far away from any kind of communication, and him and I goofily demonstrate a couple high fives, and the kids start to crack a smile, right? Like, the intention obviously starts to change. So I go back to the first kid and I extend my hand again, and he looks around at his friends around, and they're kind of nodding their approval. He takes his hand, he smacks my hand as hard as he possibly can with a high five. I'm jumping around in exaggerated pain, blowing on my hands. And from that moment on, Scott and Roger, we didn't have enough hands. Every single kid was trying to give us a high five. The little 3-year-olds who were crying in the woods had come back, crawled under the legs of their older friends, and were trying to get their high fives as well. So for 30 minutes, it was a high five craze. The high five eventually ends, and we split up into 2 teams. Sean takes 50 of the kids on his team. I take 50 of the kids on my team. And we split up into the most epic game of soccer that has ever been played. The field is 600 yards long. There's no boundaries. Trees and boulders make up the goals. And I don't know, the sun's getting ready to set, and we're on offense, and some kid passes me the ball. I'm not any good, and I plant my foot, and I awkwardly kick the ball as hard as I can, and it sails up past the diving 8-year-old goalie, and I've just scored, right? And this is not my intention, right? And I kind of panic, and I don't know what to do. So I rip off my shirt, and I start running the other direction. I'd seen this move in a soccer game on TV in the airport the week before, and they call it the airplane. And as I'm running the opposite direction, I hear a sound behind me, and I turn around and I'm looking. All 100 kids, the 50 from my team and the 50 from Sean's team, have ripped off their shirt, are airplaning behind me, screaming goal at the top of their lungs, right? And I have tears streaming down my eyes in that moment, right? I'm 10,000 miles out of my comfort zone. I'm in a place where most people told me I wouldn't even survive. And because a round ball had traveled from one place to another, it had created this moment that none of us will ever forget. And it had proved that this concept that sports can unite was going to work. And that as hard as the journey was going to be to get there, we couldn't give up. And so we finished the game. We all said our goodbyes. Look, I've told this story hundreds of times around the world. I bet you that those 100 little Zulu kids have each also told the story of that day hundreds of times. And it was an incredibly powerful moment. It was an incredibly powerful lesson for me as an insecure young 21, 22-year-old. And, my role and responsibility in the world, the beginning of my quest to answer those burning questions of why are we so divided and what creative ways can bridge those divides. So a little bit of background on how I kind of made my way from Baltimore, and some of my early experiences that began to kind of shape the trajectory of my life.
Thanks so much, Thibault. Really appreciate it. And that's an amazing story. There's certain things that happen to us in all of our lives that just absolutely strike us in the moment, and then years later as just so pivotal. And that's how that would be if I had experienced it. Let's put it that way. My question is, your degree is in business and marketing. What made you decide to focus on fields that are like this that are related to social entrepreneurship?
So I believe that, I want to say my generation, I'm not seeing who's on the other line, but the younger generation as well has a responsibility to reimagine industries, to take things the way the world is understood to be one way and flip them completely upside down, where we're leading with our purpose over our profit, right? That's a little bit of a new mentality, right? Like my father's generation was about work, money, family, right? But there was very little talk of purpose, and there was very little alignment, as far as I could tell, of purpose with work. And for me, every single thing that I do in life wants to be in service of my purpose, which is the quest to answer those two burning questions. Why are we so divided, and what creative ways can we bridge those divides? So I never set out and was like, hey, how do I get into social entrepreneurship? I set out and said, what is it I can do for a career, for my job, for the place where I'm going to spend the majority of my time in my life, to make sure that I'm always aligned with the things that are fascinating to me, with the areas where I feel like as society we are falling short, and making sure that, so it's less about the term social entrepreneurship. It's just making sure that I'm constantly in alignment with the quest to answer those two questions that drive me in my family life and my friendships and my extracurricular activities, and certainly through the work that I've been doing.
Thanks on that. And, you're really echoing what I hear from our students at UB and students at other universities too, is to have your job and your career be part of doing good or answering a larger question for the world or society. And we have a master's in nonprofit management and social entrepreneurship that kind of combines both across the business school and the college, just as one place where students find those avenues. But I think you'll hear today from students that have that same passion, and your advice is going to be really, really appreciated.
Yeah, we've got one shot at life, right? And what I've realized as I've gotten older is that we are going to spend the majority of our life at work, or asleep, right?
Yeah.
And it better be incredible, right? It better change the narrative, right? It better move the needle, or else we're going to wake up one day and we're going to realize that we let too much time go by. We tried to fit in too much of a box, and we took too big of a seat on the sidelines.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Your opening story, it sort of, I mean, I'm sure that was a pivotal experience, right? The whole trip, the whole, being able to raise the money, going over to South Africa, doing things against the odds and against belief, and learning about sort of the universal things that bring people together. I mean, the entire concept of sports for me would probably be arts or music or dancing or something else like that. But I'm just curious about what were some of the other pivotal experiences in your own life, with regard to developing the skills that you needed to found Seawall Development. Just a little bit of the things that sort of were those, like you said, those turning point moments for yourself.
Yeah. I'll share another. It's a great question. I'll share another pivotal turning point, kind of tipping point for me. And look, that the only answer that there is life experience, right? I have messed up, and I don't use the word fail anymore, because every time failure seems so terminal, right? Like I make mistakes every single day, right? And they're failures if I don't take away a lesson from them, if I don't improve as a human being as a result of the poor decision that I would have made. And so it's life that prepares you for the next steps in life and the next companies that we launch and the next ideas that we help to bring to life. The Peace Players program went really well. We ended up getting a call from Nelson Mandela, and he became our organization's largest supporter. We were invited as Roger Red to replicate the model all over the world. It was incredibly successful. Unexpectedly, in 2006, I ended up back in Baltimore. And I had this sleepless night out at my parents' house after a beautiful dinner where I couldn't close my eyes because there was something that was bothering me. I'd spent 6 years living around the world in the most divided countries on the planet, the Middle East, South Africa, Northern Ireland, Cyprus. And I had ended up back there, and I literally couldn't sleep, and I couldn't figure out what it was that was bothering me. Tossed and turned the whole night. The sun came up the next morning, and I realized that it just wasn't happening. So I get in my car and I start driving, and I get off off 83 on North Avenue, and I head west. And I pull over at the intersection of Pennsylvania and North Avenue. I think most people on this call understand the incredible significance of that. Historically of that intersection, but in more recent times, 9 years later in 2015 would be the epicenter of the Freddie Gray uprising that our city went through. And so my car's pulled over the side of the road and I get out. And this is a neighborhood that I've been made to believe my entire life that I wouldn't be welcome in and that I wouldn't be safe in. Right or wrong, that's the narrative that exists in Baltimore, right? My experience living around the world taught me that every single day we have to get out of our comfort zones. That we are so comfortable in our bubbles, right? That we fail to understand humanity in the world outside of the things that feel good to us. And had I not gotten out of my car that day in the rural part of South Africa, had we not had all of the incredible experiences around the world that made us, that my heart was beating so fast. My heart beats fast today. But of all of these places we would go to and all these people would tell us that we couldn't do these things, that idea of not being welcome someplace because that's the narrative that society wanted me to believe had no room in my being anymore. So I get out and I start to walk around the community that day. And guys, I saw all of the things that society told me I'd see: the vacant homes, the boarded up buildings, the liquor stores in the corners, the drug dealers, the clients of those drug dealers nodding off at the intersections. But I knew that there was something else in the community that I wasn't able to wrap my head and heart around in that moment. So I continued to walk around. And about 5 minutes in, I had two realizations. The first was that our country, and specifically our city of Baltimore, are more divided than all of these so-called war-torn countries where I'd spent so much time and energy over the last 6 years. That we have an inability to have open and honest conversations with people who don't look and feel like us about our similarities and differences, and that it was a ticking time bomb. That if something wasn't done about it, it would begin to explode. And if we are not seeing the explosion today, then we are completely blind, right? The second realization that I had was that the real estate industry is the most powerful connected industry on the planet. It touches every single one of us, every single moment of every single day. But with that power and connectivity, historically, it's done more to divide us and keep us apart than actually bring us together. So the realization, this pivotal, why can't I say that word today? This pivotal experience that day, I began to get really angry with myself. I grew up less than 3 miles from there. I had never been there. And I had missed all of this my whole life. And so I kind of get back to my car and I start taking notes, and I get with my dad, who's a hero of mine. He spent time in real estate and he got into public education. And we talk about launching a company called Seawall with the idea of completely reimagining the real estate industry, where buildings would actually be used to empower communities, unite cities, and help to launch really powerful ideas. And so I'll never forget the experience that day, the lessons that it taught me, and the kind of the life trajectory that it put me on. And it was just a constant reminder of, if we're not able to get out of our comfort zones and out of our bubbles and listen deeply, then we'll never know what we're missing. The ideas that need to be brought to life might never come to us because we're so used to seeing the same monotonous things every single day. And so that was another reminder and another lessons of the importance of challenging ourselves and listening deeply and always pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones.
I really, really appreciated what you just had to say and about your experience at North Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenue. And since I moved to Baltimore about 6.5 or so years ago, I've had similar experiences and have just awakened myself to the energy and the vibrance of neighborhoods all over this city. And as you were mentioning and describing your experience, Thibault, I was thinking about right there on the corner is the historic Arch Social Club, and right down the block is one of the most amazing small businesses in our city, the Avenue Bakery. And I
Yeah, I was
hate
just
to
gonna say
always
that. Yeah.
hate to always plug it, but my gosh, they have the best rolls I've ever placed in my mouth, and just a lot of people doing a lot of really amazing, innovative things, and sometimes with the barest minimum of resources. So I loved what you said about getting out of your comfort zone and walking around and not being afraid, even where people have told you to be afraid. And then you see the most amazing things. That's just really powerful. And I appreciated it.
I do want to say that I recognize the privilege in that statement too, right? Like I chose the community that I wanted to go to. I chose where I walked around. I chose when it was time to leave and drive back to the safe community safer community that I grew up in. So I don't want to come in blind. I really recognize the privilege in that statement. There's a lot of people who don't get to choose the communities they go to, how long of time they spend in them. And that's an important part of the conversation as well.
Really, really very true. I have some questions we prepared, but I see one that we didn't prepare that popped in the chat, and I thought it was really great. It's from Antoine Clayton, and thank you, Antoine. He asks, what kind of advice do you have for someone who wants to do, some of the things like you have done, travel and work to bridge a gap? Kind of a broad question, but it's really a good one.
Look, I think traveling, Antoine, is one of the souls of the world. And I don't know if you guys know this, but less than 5% of Americans have passports, which a little bit explains the mentality in our country that it begins and ends with us. And the reality of it is that like my greatest lessons and my greatest teachings have been while traveling, often for work and often by myself. Where I'm forced into conversations that I might not otherwise have. I'm forced into situations that I'm not used to. Even if I don't speak the language, you've got to find some nonverbal way to communicate, right? So I highly recommend travel as a way to expand our horizons and understandings and walk in the shoes of others. As far as finding other ways to, my main advice is find your purpose, right? Find the thing that those questions that keep you up at night and shoot you out of bed in the morning, and align the travel and the like work that you want to do as a result of that with those opportunities. There are incredible ways to do that with or without resources. There are programs like Peace Corps that will take you around the world doing a number of different things. There are a ton of other opportunities. The Peace Players program that I was a part of is constantly hiring inspiring young adults who don't necessarily need to have a bunch of basketball experience, but want to play some role in uniting our city. The program actually has come full circle and exists in Baltimore today. There's a program in Baltimore, there's a program in Chicago, there's a program in New York, there's a program in LA. And you might not even need to get on a plane to participate in something like that. So look, it's finding what in your heart, kind of what's important to you, doing the research. And I'm sure schools like UB can provide access to creative resources to figure that out. And it's finding something that feels like a good fit.
Thanks so much. Scott, did you want to jump in?
Well, I could jump in, and it's funny. Whenever I am doing tours around the city. I take people around the city all the time because I love Baltimore. And I often start out, when I go through some of the neighborhoods, I'll say Miller's Court. You know, award-winning project, did it to provide opportunities for nonprofits to have a space, and for teachers who were coming into town, who were starting out in a career so I can tell some of that story. But I'm just curious, from your perspective, what are some of your most impactful projects that you've done in the city or in other places?
Yeah, we've been really blessed, and I think one of our kind of claims to fame is that nothing we've ever done has been our idea, right? It's been as a result of listening deeply to the communities that we're blessed enough to be invited to work in. Um, I will skip forward over a bunch of projects, and Scott, you mentioned Miller's Court, which is the first Center for Educational Excellence in the country. The most significant project that our company and that I have ever worked on is the transformation of Lexington Market. So I don't know how many people are here from Baltimore. I feel like there are a lot. But this comes not at the end of our career, but it's a project that we're working on now. And we're kind of 15 years into the launch of our company. And without the previous experience of the prior 15 years, we would have never had the skills and would have never been hired to help bring that project online. So the history behind Lexington is, for those who don't know, it's the longest continuously running public market in the country. It has been operating for, I think, 230 years without ever closing, right? Just an absolute institution. It's survived fires and number of different things over time. Today, that part of West downtown is a shell of its former self, and the market itself has fallen on really hard times and has been in this continuous downward spiral. So the city, for about 10 years, has been trying to figure out how to redevelop it. And if you ask me, they went about it all wrong, right? They hired some design firm. The design firm came through and designed this really fancy new building. It looked like a kind of glass airport, didn't have any historical context to the community or the market itself. And they can never really get the project to really get any real traction. And so the city puts out an RFP, and Seawall is eventually selected to lead the development. And the first thing that we told the city was that before they announce that we're going to be involved or anything like that, we need to spend about a year just listening. And so almost every night, our team was in a different neighborhood throughout the city of Baltimore. And we would do a little 5-minute presentation about our understanding of the market and the opportunity. And we would basically ask one question, which is, what would it take for you as the citizens of Baltimore to fall in love with Lexington Market again, right? The older generation in Baltimore, all of us have a Lexington Market story. My dad's and grandfather's stories were incredible. I have some stories from there. But it's that significant for us. And so for a year, we got all of this incredible feedback, and we took notes and we pulled it all together. And at the end, we went back, and at the end of the year, we said to the city, this is an amazing opportunity. And not only do we think it's doable, but it has to happen. And here are the things that we've heard, right? And if we can agree that this is how it's going to move forward, then we're all in. The number one thing that we said was that this is not a real estate project. This is an opportunity to prove that a single building brought to life in a really inclusive way can unite our city at one of its most divided times. And that became kind of our North Star, right? Or one of our North Stars as we began to figure out how to bring this really complicated project to life. The three things that we heard the most throughout the process of our listening tour is that in order for people to fall in love with the market again, the new market had to represent the beautiful diversity of our city. Today in the market, less than 5% of the businesses are Black-owned businesses. Very few of the businesses are city resident-owned businesses. So the narrative was really clear that if we're going to come spend our money there, if we're going to come patronize, if we're going to come support the new market, the market has to look like our city. And I'd say that was probably the most important piece of feedback that we ended up getting. And so kind of fast forward, we ended up launching closing financing, working through the design, had countless focus groups and are still having them, and ended up launching the construction project at the very beginning of COVID. They couldn't have timed it any worse, right? The restaurant, food and beverage industry is shutting down all over. 50% of restaurants are closing. Nobody knows if we will ever gather again in a place that holds thousands of people at once. And we've just closed financing and are beginning the process of moving forward and have to recruit 50 vendors for the new space. We put out the application, and I believe because of the inclusive way that we went around listening, because of the groundswell, because of the partners and thought leaders that we brought to the table to make sure that we were reaching far past our really small network and reaching out throughout the city of Baltimore to let them know that this opportunity existed. We ended up getting over 350 applications for those 50 spots during the height of COVID. Over 50% of those applicants were Black-owned businesses. Over 50% of those applicants were city resident-owned businesses. Over 50% were women-owned businesses, right? And it just kind of like confirmed the kind of like passion that the city has for supporting itself. I'm saying the city, I'm not talking about the municipality, I'm talking about the people of this great city. And it helped us realize a second piece, which is that, this is done right. This has the opportunity to be one of the largest small business incubators that our city has ever seen. And what are some of the challenges with starting a business, right? Access to capital. So one of the things that we did is we raised a fund. I forget what we called it, the Lexington Market Small Business Fund. A lot of the vendors that applied wouldn't have access to traditional forms of capital. They don't have the credit scores, they don't have the balance sheets, and they just flat out wouldn't lend money. And in partnership with Baltimore Community Lending and a bunch of foundations, we put together $1 million fund that certainly will grow if need be, to support those businesses with that critical capital to help them get off the ground. So that project is so important to me as someone from Baltimore. Kind of defines our company's approach to real estate, in understanding that the things we work on, as I said in the beginning, aren't our ideas. There was a result of deeply listening to the communities and the end users and the tenants that end up really being in the space the most.
Rao, that was fantastic to listen to, and really incredible advice for all of us and our students too. I mean, you made me think, Thibault, of some examples of where development goes wrong by not being inclusive, and as you said so well, the listening to what people in the city want. Where I went to college, University of Georgia, the Classic Center, this incredible civic center and arts center that was built in our city. But yet when they designed it so that there was the biggest, flattest brick wall facing in the direction of the African-American community, and that symbolism, but also the lack of inviting an entire portion, the eastern portion of our community, away from that center was such an oversight. And so design and inclusion of who are the vendors and who will be shopping there, all also real and so important.
Yeah, how do we change that narrative, right? I mean, the narrative on development is developers coming in and telling a community what they're going to give them. How do we make sure that development happens with and for a community and not to a community? And I think that's it really starts with listening.
Absolutely. I wanted to take a second to call attention to and let everyone know that there's some really incredible feedback and ideas being passed along in our chat, and some questions which I'll certainly get to. And recognizing some great comments of Dr. Heather Wyatt Nickel of our School of Public and International Affairs, Dr. Sasha Sheehan notes, and I was thinking this as well, Sasha, in chat, we formed a really nice relationship with Peace Players Baltimore just, I think it was just last year. And Sasha is probably the best, well, one of many of the best in our college at getting opportunities out to students, and posts into the chat some of the internships that are available at Peace Players Baltimore that we have encountered due to that relationship we formed. And so they're doing terrific work. Miss Nagbo, as well as Martin, met with us. And then certainly want to get to the question of Professor Andrea Cantora is with us today. And if you haven't had a chance to meet her, she runs a remarkable program called Second Chance. It's a prison education program inside of Jessup Correctional. And she's a dynamo, to say the least.
We were on a Zoom call with a bunch of the students at Jessup last week, and
good.
Was look, I've been having an amazing time on this book tour over the last, I don't know, four months. My experience through Zoom with the guys down at Jessup was the most powerful experience that I've had. And I'm just so grateful for having been invited in, and that will be the first of many of those kinds of conversations.
I agree completely. The 3 or 4 times that Andrea has invited me in to meet with our students, education is not just a personal passion. It's for our students there. it's a passion for the world. It's a passion for every person and they always say that when we succeed, this will give an opportunity for other folks like us inside of prisons to have a chance to succeed as well. It's just really moving program, to say the least. So I know we have more questions, and we'll get to the questions in Q&A and in the chat here in a few minutes. But building on some of the most impressive projects that you've had, and mentioning Lexington Market, so absolutely great. We know too that Seawall has had a huge impact on the Remington neighborhood inside of Baltimore. And question is, what led you to focus on developing the Remington neighborhood with some of those projects?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm going to get to a different answer, but I'll answer that as well. So our first project was trying to create discounted apartments for teachers and collaborative office space for nonprofits focused on kids and education. Scott said something about that. We looked all over town in all of the fancy neighborhoods, and we couldn't find anything that worked. Miraculously, we stumbled on this abandoned old warehouse at the corner of Howard and 26th Street. For those of you who have been up there, Charmington's coffee shop is right there. And there was a building that had been built 150 years ago. It had been vacant for 30 years. Every developer in town had looked at it. Nobody wanted to touch it because they didn't believe in the community's ability to succeed, really. And we, with the help of some teachers and nonprofits in the neighborhood, went around this really inclusive way in turning that project into the country's first Center for Educational Excellence. And like Peace Players, everybody bet against it and us and said that it was impossible, but that the idea of the words can't and no helped us really understand that the people who are saying that can only see what's in front of them in the moment. They're not able to see what something ought to be, right? And so we were able to build a groundswell behind this idea of course, we have to build a building that rolls out the red carpet for the people doing the most important work in our cities. And the project was really successful. By the time we finished construction, there was a waiting list of over 300 teachers waiting to get in. If you were a teacher, you got to pay half price in rent. We had over a dozen nonprofits doing incredible work in the city that we had run out of space for. So, amazing. But our intent was just to do one building in Remington, and no interest or desire to do anything else. And then an amazing thing happened in that a bunch of the teachers that were living with us in our apartments came to us after a couple of years and said, this is amazing. We're all in. We want to stay in the classroom. We want to keep teaching. We want to stay in the city of Baltimore. And we want to buy a home, right? Make an economic investment in the city. All the reasons we built the building to begin with. but we want the home to be in Remington and we want you guys to build it for us. And we didn't know how to build homes, right? And we didn't know anything about the like for sale product. But they said, look, like, you know, we've all come in and we've done this incredible thing in this building. It can't end here. If you look around the building, there are 30 vacant homes that surround it right now. These are homes that are dragging down the community. They shouldn't be vacant this way. If you, Seawall, buy those homes and fix them up, we'll buy them back from you in partnership. So, you know, we love the idea, again, driven by the kind of the end users. We got with the community to understand what why the homes were vacant. And we called those 10 teachers back who had challenged us to do this and said, you guys are in trouble, because we ended up buying all of the homes. We were buying homes for like $1, right? We were buying homes for $1,000 or $5,000 because nobody wanted the homes in Remington at the time. And those teachers came in, we let the teachers design their own homes. We let the teachers choose their own sale price that would work for them and their budgets. And it was an amazing process of really transferring ownership and authorship. We had incredible conversations with the community. We ended up building this model unit to see how it would work. One, could we build one of these? Two, would there be any interest? And Roger and Scott, we hosted an open house on a beautiful October morning in like 2013. We had done a model. We had 29 more vacant homes to go. And we thought maybe 10 or 15 couples would show up to that open house, which would have been an incredible first day, right? 300 people came. All 30 homes sold within the first hour, right? To teachers at discounted rates. Teachers and police officers, right? That was the deal. And we realized that something really special was going to happen in the community, right? And the neighborhood was working on a master plan for itself. We had been involved in the master plan, but started to take it more seriously. And we ended up buying a lot of real estate pretty quickly, and not buying it with the idea that we were going to try to make a bunch of money off of it. And we wanted to get in first, and we didn't want anybody to be able to come in and have opportunity. Buying it because we realized that other people were starting to speculate in the community, and that if we bought it, at least we would be able to ensure that the community always had a seat at the table and helping to drive what that real estate would become. Again, it's not our responsibility to tell the community what they're going to get. It's our responsibility to listen and work with them to understand what's missing and how real estate can help empower. And so we ended up doing way more work in Remington than kind of ever expected, and have a lot more opportunities and work to go. So that's the Remington conversation. And I'll be surprised if this question doesn't come up, which is the gentrification question, right? So the reality of it, and I'll tell the story as it kind of happened in my eyes and in my heart, at our Seawall's 10-year reunion. Not 10-year reunion, 10-year strategic planning time. 10 years is an incredible milestone. A lot of companies don't make it that far. And we had made it that far. And in those first 10 years, we had done about $250 million worth of development. That was $249 million more than we ever thought we would do, right? We were intending to be quite a small company, but we were driven by this like greater force. And we had asked people to come with an audacious idea to this strategic planning. Everybody had to come up with one. And this young woman that worked with us stood up and said, the unintended consequences of the success of the projects that we have done are having a negative impact on legacy residents, where displacement is becoming real and gentrification is a problem. And if we pretend that it isn't our fault and we run from it, then we're missing an opportunity to change the narrative, and we're pretending as if it didn't have anything to do with us. And it was an incredible moment for us as a company, where instead of running from it, we dove deep into it, right? Again, all of the work that we thought was pure, right? The discount apartments for teachers and for sale housing and nonprofit spaces, and all of the things that felt right at the time. What we didn't realize was what other people would do as a result of that, what other landlords would do as far as doubling or tripling rent and all these other things that can really be issues. And we kind of doubled down on it. We started this process of understanding how development can continue to happen, where it's being done with the community in total focus of what the kind of challenges are, making sure that displacement, the legacy residents and the businesses that want to stay always have a seat at the table and are always included in the conversations. And it was really eye-opening, you know, and the reality of it is that we kind of missed it, right? In hindsight, had we known this was what would have happened, we would have done more at the start line. But we didn't. So as we get ready to do future projects and future communities, we're much more aware of that conversation to begin with, have better tools to make sure that we're limiting that displacement in the future. And I think that's something that caught us off guard, but I'm really proud of our kind of reaction to it, and pivot as a result of the lessons learned along the way.
You know, I actually I love that whoever that person was, you know, they deserve a bonus. It's because I have, it's funny, I was in a meeting a couple weeks ago, and we were just having this conversation about at what point do you not realize the consequences, you know, sort of the unintended consequences, and whether there's a what are those tools that you need to have to, you know, sort of um, face the unintended consequences up front. And I think part of what you talked about earlier was really this idea of needing to have capital, because in places where you walk into, there may not be a capital market to support the idea of being, you know, addressing the unintended consequences early on. But that's probably a conversation for another day. But it does go to some of the work that you're doing, which is really around focus on, you know, social entrepreneurship. And I would sort of say in a parallel universe, or in a parallel way, sort of being mission driven. You know, which is really what, you know, a lot of social entrepreneurship is in lots of ways. And in the same way, nonprofit organizations are really sort of driven around, you know, focused on the mission, and advancing and really hoping to accomplish a mission. And you do a lot of work in that area, right? You know, you support a lot of nonprofits. And so I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about some of the work that you do around nonprofit service. I mean, you know, nonprofits are in lots of ways the gap fillers, the glue, the community builders, of the places that we live, and the services and the supports that we need in our communities. So I'd just love for you to give us a little bit more about some of your nonprofit service.
Yeah, look, I think there's so much of the work that we've done has been around providing incredible space for nonprofits. Nonprofits are used to Class C space, third, fourth, fifth generation space, basements, very little natural light, not sexy space. And to be honest with you, that's just not fair, right? These nonprofits are doing life-changing work throughout our communities. They deserve to have the best space that we have to offer. And so, you know, we got into it to help change the narrative. The first nonprofit center we did was for Joe Jones and the Center for Urban Families over in West Baltimore. My dad and Joe are like brothers, and, you know, he found out that we had launched Seawall, and he asked us if we would help him, like, soup to nuts, figure out they were in some Class C, Class D space that the city was kind of giving them for $1. And while free, it didn't allow them to create the culture and advance the program in a way that Joe and his team really wanted to grow it. And so, you know, it took some creative thinking, it took some creative financing, but at the end of the day, we were able to deliver a dream building for the Center for Urban Families that has allowed them to continue it way into the future and continue to really change that narrative. And so we've done a bunch of those. We've done a bunch of adaptive reuse of warehouses for charter schools. We've done a bunch of buildings where we bring a lot of nonprofits together, where they can share resources under one roof, share conference rooms and training centers and other resources that they all need, but they might not need them all day long. And it's been a huge part of our company's mission. It's been interesting, and I'm going to push a little bit against the grain on this. And I every time I have a chance to talk to kind of the younger generation, the nonprofit model has to change a little bit, right? And what I encourage people to do is not default when they have an idea that feels community center and community focused, not to necessarily default to having to have it be a nonprofit organization. There are models that exist out there where you can run a for-profit company and still have incredible impact. Like our company is an example of that. We are a for-profit entity, right? I want to say for-profit, right? Like we pretty much break even at the end of each year. That's the goal. But at the end of the day, yeah, we really are a for-profit, and we can make money over time, right? We own the you guys still there? Yeah. We own the real estate, right? And that will appreciate, and we'll buy down debt, even though we're keeping all of our rents artificially low. We're making business decisions to leave cash on the table to be in alignment with our purpose, right? And you can do that in the for-profit sector just as well these days as traditionally we've been able to do it in the nonprofit sector. So I encourage people to not settle on having to be a nonprofit if they feel like they have a community-focused idea. There are ways to make money and do really good work, city-changing, life-changing work along the way. Marrying the two, because at the end of the day, we all want to make money, right? We need it to provide opportunities to survive, to give back, whatever's important to us, to provide opportunities for our families. And marrying the two together, I think, is increasingly achievable and really important.
Thank you so much. Wanted to give a couple shout outs to some other terrific leaders who have joined here today. I wanted to thank Mr. Henry Mortimer, who leads our University of Baltimore's incredible Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. They're doing amazing work in the Merrick School of Business there. And so many of his students are, Thibault, going in that very direction of social entrepreneurship and finding ways for the private sector, so-called, to have such an impact on the world as your firm has been doing. Dr. Joe Adler, who leads our Masters of Public Administration program and has been a leader in the state of Maryland for many, many years at the state and local government level before we got lucky to have him teach for us. And then also with us today, Dr. Ann Cotton, who leads our Schaefer Center for Public Policy and is one of the persons responsible for this event and so many others in our city and state. Ann is usually on and more vocally active, but is attending a conference right now in Nashville. And I was really surprised to see that she logged on through her airport traveling. So thanks, Ann. We have one last prepared question, and then we're going to really open it up to some of the questions in Q&A and chat. We have until 5:30, so please, to those who have attended today, thank you, students, for coming. Please add questions and we'll get to them. But our last one is really about your book, which I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about. Just wanted to get a sense of what some of the most important lessons or ideas from your book, or maybe I could just say it this way. Tell us a little bit about your book, Larger Than Yourself, which is, I know you can order on Amazon, you can order at Barnes & Noble, you can order all over the world. Congratulations on that too.
Yeah. Thank you, Roger. I'm really excited about it. It's called Larger Than Yourself. It's just come out a few months ago, and it explores how small ideas brought to life in really inclusive ways can go on to become powerful and impactful movements. So as you've gotten a glimpse, I've kind of lived a fascinating life personally and professionally, and have gotten to learn a lot along the way. And I've been fortunate to get to speak a lot, right? And every time that I'd get up to speak, when I'd finish, people would come and they would start asking me questions as if the things that I were saying were a bit of a different language, a bit of a foreign language. And for me, it was second nature, right? Around how we grow ideas, how we do it in community, how it's important that we build things inside out, where we're giving everybody that the ideas touch that elusive feeling of being a part of something larger than themselves, sharing that sense of pride of ownership and authorship in what's getting created. And so people would ask these questions and I'd start taking notes, and the notes became chapters, and the chapters became a book somewhat out of nowhere. It took 5 years, which was a beautiful labor of love. But the book is meant for the kind of the next generation entrepreneur, right? The group that wants to reimagine industries, flip things upside down, look at the world in a completely different way. And it explores these 7 principles that I've kind of discovered along the way, and it weaves them together in, I think, really cool fashion. There's 21 or so chapters in it, and every chapter is a story where you're kind of riding shotgun with me, like the soccer story that I told in the beginning, right? There are real teachable moments in that. And it's interesting. I think you guys all know probably Wes Moore, who's running for governor, who's a dear friend, and he wrote the foreword for the book. And I gave him the first attempt at the manuscript, and he's like, T, you're off. Two things: you need to be more vulnerable in your writing, and you can't lecture to the reader. Let the reader come to their own conclusions. Tell the stories and let the reader come to their own conclusion of what the important lessons are along the way. So I've kind of weaved these 7 principles that I've discovered on how to grow an idea and turn it into a movement throughout these 21 chapters, and hopefully pretty kind of gripping stories that make it not like a traditional business book, but like a bit of a weaving adventure that hopefully at the end of it leaves you kind of inspired to flip things upside down and look at the world and shake things up a little bit more. So I'm excited about it. It's been a really humbling experience, but it's been fun watching it come to life.
So, so you had a couple of questions that are actually inspired by the book, and I'm going to touch on one of them by Josh. He was asking about what has some of the challenging feedback to the book been, and is there anything you hadn't thought of or were considered beforehand in the writing of that?
Josh, it's a good question. I think that. I think some of the challenging feedback are things that didn't make it into the book just because of the timing of it. There's some the Lexington Market didn't make it in, and some other pieces that we've worked on, especially here in Baltimore, that people have questions about, but that just wasn't a part of that first book. But the feedback's been really, really, really great. It's been I think it's caught people a little off guard because most people read it in a day or two. It's been described as a little bit of a page turner where you're feel like you're along for the ride and on this really neat kind of journey and adventure, not your traditional business book, but with really kind of important, relevant lessons. I mean, look, our world is upside down right now, right? We are the most confused we've ever been as human beings. And the book really kind of challenges us to get out of our comfort zones and to get back to relating as human beings, to get back to our roots of being able to listen really deeply, and hopefully inspires this next generation of future leaders to just look at the world in a different way.
Thanks. There's another question in chat about the book. Kim, and where I'm from, it's pronounced Winder, but if it's Winder, I apologize. The book inspires to promote great ideas. What would be your advice for the person who has, and I'm trying to get it, it's split between 2 screens. It's apologies here, missing a piece of it. Oh, good grief. One of the beauties of technology and chat functions.
Yeah, great ideas. What would your advice be for the person who has an idea, but it feels it is small or it won't be supported?
Thank you. You rescued me.
So there's something called the power of one, which is taking that first step, right? All of our ideas that start small. And I guess let me back up. It's really important that we understand that the ideas that we work on aren't ours, that they've always existed. They've sat on the tip of the universe's tongue waiting to be brought to life. Our ancestors and their ancestors and their ancestors worked on some form of the idea. And if we are blessed enough to help bring an idea to life, it is not ours. The more we try to claim ownership of it, sole ownership of it, the more we'll stunt that idea's growth. the more we understand that that idea has traveled through time and will continue to travel through time, and the more inclusive we can be in having a lot of people feel like the idea is also theirs, the more chances that idea has for success. But back to this like power of one concept, we have to be able to take the first step. As human beings, we are so afraid of that first step. We're so afraid that the idea is too small. We're so afraid that we won't get funding. We're so afraid of people might laugh at our idea, that it won't be relevant, that it won't be well accepted, that we'll risk everything on bringing the idea to life and we'll fall flat on our face, which might happen. It happens all the time. And we are afraid to take that first step. Only when we take that first step will we have any clarity on what the second step might be and what the third step might be after that. But stuck in our kind of fear and stuck with the inability to take that first step, Kim, we'll never know. So I don't think any idea is too small. It's supposed to start small. But as you get ready to take that, try not to take it alone. I didn't have a lot of time to talk about this today, but one of the principles of the book is make sure we're building things inside out, where we're surrounding ourselves with the end users, right? In our case, a lot of times it was teachers and nonprofits, with the community, whatever the neighborhood is that we're working in, and the team, our guardian angels. I talk a lot about this. Who are the people who you've surrounded yourself who have failed more times than you will ever succeed? And I say failed, but they've also succeeded an incredible amount. They've done such amazing work throughout their lives. Who are those people that you know that you can bring into your corner, right? So bringing in the end users in the community and that team, transferring and sharing in the ownership and authorship of the idea so that it's not just you, but before you know it, you have a couple, dozens, hundreds, thousands of people all equally as excited about this one idea. And the idea will grow past your wildest dreams because it won't be just yours, right? It'll have been shared with so many people. It's the concept of movements, and there certainly are some incredible social movements that have taken place, but there are movements in the business world, there are movements in the philanthropic world, and they result as a part of bringing ideas to life in inclusive ways. So Kim, my advice is take that first step. I have no idea what the second step will be, but take it.
Thanks, Kim, so much. I had another one that I pulled out of chat and did a little better this time. This was from Andrea Cantora, Dr. Cantora, and she began by saying, first of all, Thibault, thanks for visiting our Second Chance students a few weeks ago. And then says, the other hat that Andrea wears is criminal justice professor. My on-campus students and I often discuss solutions to crime prevention and reduction. When I finished your book, I thought, could Seawall's approach to development be the answer? Have you thought about that, the type of work you do and the impact it could have on our highest crime areas?
So look, again, I'm going to go back to this thing of I am such a simple man, right? Like, I think it's so cool that none of the ideas we've ever worked on have been ours. They've come as a result of chats and emails like this, of people seeing the opportunity of how the built environment can impact some form of the work they do in a completely different way when you're thinking about it under new guidance. So, my answer would be like, let's think through it. Let's talk about it. I will say that I talked about Lexington Market, and there were three things that we heard on our listening tour. I had talked about the one, which was the need to represent the beautiful diversity of our city. Another one was that the environment and safety, the perception of crime that surround Lexington Market today make it an uninviting place. And it's one of the reasons that people have stopped coming to Lexington recently over the years. And so one of the opportunities in the development of the market, which doesn't fall under like a developer scope, but certainly fell under our responsibility, is how can this new market address the crime and safety that surround the market today? And Andrew, I don't know if that's one of the, if that's hinting at one of the answers to the questions that you're asking, but I absolutely think that that there's a path for that.
So this may be a sort of a continuation of that conversation, and about uniting community. What are some of the opportunities or possibilities that you see for uniting communities here in Baltimore, or people and places to get involved with in this conversation?
I think our opportunity to unite community starts within ourselves, right? Are we willing and ready to be united? If we are, what are we doing to get out of our comfort zones, to get out of the bubbles that exist? Because in them, we guarantee we won't unite anything or anybody. So I think we need to kind of look internally first, if we're serious about trying to find an answer or a solution to that. Second part is there's anything can unite us, right? We've seen it done with sports. We've seen it done with music. We've seen it done with art. We're seeing it done with buildings today. Can accounting bring us together, right? Can finance bring us together? Can manufacturing bring us together? Can parks and public places bring us together? They're to a certain extent, if it's something you're passionate about, build something around that passion and test it out. As far as who's doing it, I mean, I'd have to kind of like look around at and I don't really have anything off the top of my head. I mean, I certainly know that we're chipping away at it with real estate, the Peace Players program that we've talked about, chipping away at it. The work that United Way is doing a lot of this stuff. The YMCA is doing a lot of this. There are lacrosse leagues that have come down from Harlem that are doing a lot of this. It's out there. You just have to kind of open your eyes to it and ask around a little bit more. But I'm sorry I don't have more kind of concrete suggestions on that.
That's great. To get to our next question, I'm going to do a little advertisement for our students, and it's really much related to what we are discussing today. Be on the lookout, everyone, for the call for our summer class of our Community Development Fellowship program that we advertised this week. For the students here, we have a program where we pay a living wage to our students to be placed into service with community revitalization organizations all across the city of Baltimore, city main streets, CDCs, and other nonprofits that are doing community development and revitalization work. It's a great experience, and for those of you attending, please apply. It's an opportunity to really make a difference and learn a lot from the communities in Baltimore. And the question, Thibault, is kind of related to this as well. Community development in the city of Baltimore is kind of a big word, and it means a lot of different things. And there's so many different organizations working on changing Baltimore and making it better. And just wanted to get a sense from you how you see the community development sort of field in Baltimore. What are the strengths, or what maybe could we do better in our city?
I guess I'm going to interpret community development as community-driven real estate development. That might not be the question, and feel free to chime in and correct me, because there's other forms of community development out there.
I think probably the broad sense, real estate is absolutely a huge piece of it, but as you were just getting at, there's so much more to it. Mm-hmm. Creating a farmer's market, a city main street creates a farmer's market in a neighborhood that doesn't have one. Those so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's why we all love Baltimore, right? And if you're not from here, you talk about all of the problems that exist. If you're from here, you talk about all the opportunities that exist, right? And so I think one that like is glaring for us in the neighborhood of Remington, which has had a ton of development, is changed dramatically over the last 10 or 15 years or so. Less than a quarter mile away on the other side of 83 is the neighborhood of Reservoir Hill, and Interstate 83 created an incredible divide. Yes, that's right, Scott. It created an incredible divide between that west side and the east side, and I'd like to think that it was artificial, but it really was not. I'd like to think that that division was unintentional, but it probably was intentional. And there's a project called the Big Jump, which is a little controversial because it takes up traffic and it's a little harder to move around, but it's created this walk lane, bike lane that has, to a certain extent, begun to unite our two communities. And the impetus behind that allowed us to kind of think even further and reach out. Now, as we're getting ready to do stuff in development, in Remington, we're reaching out to the neighborhoods of Reservoir Hill to make sure that they're equally as engaged in the conversations around what development could be. And it's because somebody put up some barriers to allow people to walk and bike between these two communities that hadn't really figured out how to connect. And the farmers market's an awesome example. I think that in Baltimore, we have to be aware of not duplicating efforts. There's so many of us out there doing so many things. There's so many foundations, there's so many nonprofits, there's so many for-profits doing really important work. And we need to make sure that we're not doing it in silos, that we're finding ways to share resources and best practices and ideas and go after the same pots of limited money, and kind of like share resources and look at that community development angle all kind of inclusively and together. So I don't know if that answers the question, but community development is a strong word in Baltimore, and one word that we take really seriously throughout our neighborhoods.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. And yeah, you definitely did get at the question very well, indeed. And appreciated Johnny McMurtry in chat mentioning your experience with Greater Baybrook in the Community Development Fellows Program. So if anyone's interested, try to find Johnny. He's been doing it. Other questions you might have? We might have had another one pop up. Let's see. Oh, it's a thank you and another great comment. Final thoughts, Thibault?
No, I just, my hat's off to you guys at UB for taking something that was kind of status quo, and not accepting status quo as the path forward. There isn't a student or a faculty member or a dean or a board member from UB that I haven't met that doesn't exemplify the citizen that Baltimore needs. Thoughtful, always asking kind of the complicated question, but doing it in a way where it's driven by love and real curiosity and the hopes and desires to make this city great. So I love the hyper focus of it, and how UB doesn't look at itself as the like four walls of the campus that's being created there, but looks at it throughout the city and through the region. So keep inspiring all of us. It's really neat to say.
I can't thank you enough. I have to say personally, I really found today to be just absolutely inspiring to me. I really enjoyed listening to you and speaking with you. I can't thank you enough on behalf of our students, our faculty, our staff, and our community at UB, which is the broader community, as you just mentioned, for your time today with us. Scott, thank you so very much for your service in our city as well, and for being with us today. And I really enjoyed teaming up with you today for this interview. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, and Thibault, thanks a lot. I just one takeaway from this discussion and some of your comments earlier. I really appreciate that you didn't listen to the narrative that was painted by other people about people, both in South Africa and in Penn North, because that's how we too many people live, is by the narratives that get painted by someone else about someone else. And when you step outside of that, you might discover there's a whole nother world of opportunity that you didn't see before. So I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, and thank you, Scott, again. It's always amazing to be in space with you. We've got two choices in life, right? We can sit on the sidelines watching TV, scrolling through Instagram, admiring all of the people doing the incredible heavy lifts out there, or we can roll up our sleeves and decide that we're going to be a part of the solution. And I think that everyone I've gotten to know at UB is in the latter camp of wanting to do the heavy lift, and that's really inspiring to see.
Thank you so much, very much again. I want to wish you the best of luck with your book, and I know we'll be seeing you again, and I can't wait to meet you again in person. Thank you for being with us today, and everyone have a beautiful night. Spring is definitely here, and driving around Baltimore, you'll see it. Enjoy your evenings, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Scott, thank you. You were terrific.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. It was a great pleasure to be here today, Roger. Thanks.
Oh gosh, I'd love to see you again soon too. We should have lunch sometime. And I love your mantle in the background, by the way. It's
Thank you. As a matter of fact, my Reservoir Hill neighborhood.
I was going to ask if you didn't mind where you were in the city. We live in Northeast Baltimore in sort of Hamilton area, I guess.
Yeah.
Reservoir Hill is great. What a
Yeah,
cool place.
I mean, when he's talking about the big jump, that's how I get to our house. I do lunch meetings there now because I can just walk across the bridge and without anxiety and walk into the neighborhood.
You are so absolutely close by to so many really great things in the park. That's what's
Yeah.
which I love.
Yeah, well, that's the gem.
It is indeed. Well, gosh, let me know if you need anything, and looking forward to seeing you again really soon. But thanks also for your support of the Schaefer Center. It's been really helpful to us.
Sure thing. Sure thing.
Great.
All right, Roger. Take care.
Have a good one, Scott. Take care.
You as
Bye-bye.
well.